Thank you very much. And I'll welcome you all to come to Rajasthan with your projects.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sandhu. I would now request Shri Ashok Solomon, Chairman Chintals India Limited, to please talk about the public-private partnership in development of urban infrastructure. Mr. Solomon, thank you very much. And I would request all the eminent speakers to please stick to the timeline as we are already running short of it. Thank you.
And I'm the only one who's been told that. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. As the lady just warned me that we are running out of time, so I am going to cut my speech short. Successive speakers have already said a lot about the statistics, about the shortage of housing, the rising population, the government schemes that are being offered as incentives, and so on. But I think I should approach this subject from a little different angle. I think we will all agree that the economy and the well-being of people, their standards of living, are directly proportionate to the infrastructure that we are able to build in our cities, towns, and even villages. I don't think anybody here would disagree with that. And this includes, of course, power, water, transport, telecommunications, wastage disposal, and so on. Now, unlike a lot of young people out there, I come from an era where India suffered the ignominy of being ranked amongst the poorest of nations. We share a space with the least developed countries of the world. I was born a year before we attained independence. And I remember that when I was small, our villages had hardly any pakka houses. Throughout India, villages were simply scattered mud homes, mud huts, with a spattering of maybe a few pakka houses belonging to zamindars. Where I lived, I was the more fortunate one, born in Delhi in an upscale area called Daryaganj. Now there, if I can remember right, most homes, most toilets did not even have a flushing system. Telecommunication was terrible. I know people out there who are my vintage would remember, and young people would find it very strange, that if you had to make a call to Agra, you could wait almost a day before you got through. There used to be a thing called trunk call. A lot of people may not have ever heard about it. It suffered the fate of the dinosaur because now we have the mobile phone. At the press of a button, you can communicate anywhere in the world, any far-flung corner of the world, from even the smallest of villages in this country. We have made very impressive strides since the government opened up to the private sector. We have made beautiful strides in telecom, in, let's say, even infrastructure pertaining to power, and so many other areas. We have gained a lot of development. We have propelled ourselves ahead of many other nations that used to be way in front of us. We are now ranked amongst the fastest growing economies of the world. That is, of course, something that we all take pride in. But then, there were many much smaller countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Dubai that have zoomed past us in their infrastructure development and have become the admiration of the world. Why is that? How did that happen? I'm sure a lot of us already know that much of that development happened at the hands of us Indians. Those governments had the foresight to tap the private sector, including some of our own private firms. Even today, some of the royal families in the Gulf and other countries are using Indian advisors from the private sector to advise them in infrastructure building, in the overall development of their economies. Now, if we can attain that sort of respect in these other countries, if we can develop those beautiful infrastructure in other countries, why can't we do it here? I'm glad that the government has woken up to the importance of PPP and is introducing policies. Several officers from the government have told us about the various schemes that they're bringing and the incentives they're offering, the help they will extend to the private sector in order to come out and build homes for the masses. Now that is all very encouraging. But yet, a lot needs to be done. We've been told how the government will be cooperating with the private sector. But yet we also know that some of the biggest problems faced by developers are created by the government itself. The approval process is excruciating. We know that it takes dozens of approvals before a project can actually get off the ground. We must address those issues, and the private sector, representatives from the private sector must interact with the government in order to simplify those methods. What we don't realize that the demographics, the population demographics of any country actually depends on the infrastructure of its cities, towns, and villages. What happens is that large cities with better employment opportunities, with better educational and medical facilities, work like a magnet for people from smaller towns that gravitate to these larger cities in search of a better life for themselves and for their families. Now, this obviously strains the existing infrastructure in those cities. City governments, often referred to as urban local bodies, are unable to cope with this. But somehow they stubbornly cling to the monopoly of building the infrastructure. I believe that if they were to turn to the private sector and hand over some of that responsibility to the private sector, we will be able to create infrastructure, if not totally at the speed of the rising population, but certainly much faster than the government is able to do it alone. What happens is that larger cities continue to grow larger and small towns remain where they are. They languish in the kind of non-infrastructure state that they are in. So I've already been warned, so I will now conclude with my few suggestions that the government should think of. Early involvement of the private sector in the concept planning, in the conceptualization, and also in the implementation of projects. Take steps to decongest dense cities